Cynthia Fish had her third cup of coffee, seething with anger. Even her favorite drink, paired with a small chocolate, couldn't restore her inner balance. The cause of her distress was her son's unexpected decision to get married. It wouldn't have been a problem ordinarily, but his choice infuriated the mother more than a red cape enrages a bull at a Spanish corrida. Oh, where did he dig up her? Cynthia thought. Even her name is so old-fashioned. Zoe? What misfortune is this? The secretary peeked into the office and asked obligingly. Mrs. Fish, you have an appointment at the bridal store at 3 p.m. Have your plans changed? Their director called, wanting to personally meet such an important client as yourself. Cynthia muttered under her breath, just great, I'll have to grin and bear it. Being successful and a media personality can be challenging at times. It wouldn't take much for the media to catch wind of why she's visiting the best bridal salon in town. While the official news of her son's wedding hasn't hit the press and television yet, it's only a matter of time. Soon, a curious buzz will surround their family. Meanwhile, Philip and Zoe were oblivious to everything around them, lost in their love. They decided to marry not because they were expecting a child, as often happens with other couples. They could live without each other, be apart for hours, days, or weeks, but they simply didn't want to. Without each other, it became hard to breathe, colors faded, the sun failed to warm them, and winter's frost seemed unbearably icy. This was how Philip justified his desire to marry at 22 to his mother. She tried to understand him but failed. Images from her own youth kept flooding her mind. Cynthia's parents were middle class. Her father was an engineer, her mother an accountant. Both worked at a large, stable, and well-developing machine-building plant. All employees received their salaries punctually. Hard work was rewarded with commendations, certificates of merit, and regular bonuses. As Cynthia's mother used to say, we don't live paycheck to paycheck, but much more comfortably. We vacation at the sea every year and could afford a summer house. We're no worse off than others. And then suddenly, everything crumbled before their eyes. The factory stopped working. Cynthia's parents lost their jobs overnight. Her mother started to visit the pawn shop, where her gold jewelry gradually disappeared, followed by her silver teaspoons with stones, once considered a family treasure. Cynthia, a high school student, didn't immediately grasp the gravity of the situation. She'd dash home from school and hurry off with friends to the movies or a disco. Studies came easily to her, rarely requiring more than 2 hours for homework. She'd grab a slice of apple pie, gulp down milk from a jar, and head out. What more could a 17-year-old want? They scraped by for a year. Her father found low-paid work at a construction site. Cynthia's mother also found part-time work, doing bookkeeping for a newly opened small enterprise, but she couldn't hold a job long. She was used to being an accountant at a large enterprise, and for the small companies she didn't have the needed knowledge. As graduation approached, it became clear that a new outfit for the blue-eyed Cynthia was out of the question. So her mother turned to Samantha, who lived in their apartment block. Samantha owned a cheap clothing store near the bus stop. These weren't quality items, just cheap, disposable treasures. But the business thrived on quantity over quality, selling inexpensive goods that people could afford and not spend much money. A beautiful dress for Cynthia was found in Samantha's stock, but it was beyond the means of her parents. The girl was upset, but then Samantha offered to work for her for a week in exchange for the dress. Samantha wanted to rest, and no one could replace her in her work, so it was a mutually beneficial cooperation. The girl agreed, and soon the unexpected happened. All the goods left in her care were flying off the counters and hangers to their new happy owners. Neither Cynthia nor the surprised Samantha had anticipated such an effect. Samantha laughed. Well, you're incredible, my friend. You have a magic touch. Even I couldn't sell the things so quickly. You're a natural salesperson, managing to convince even the most hesitant customers to buy. If you don't find your calling after school, I'll be happy to hire you as a saleswoman. At the graduation party, Cynthia was the belle of the ball. The dress she had chosen before was rejected. Instead, Samantha brought her assistant a cocktail dress that was nothing short of miraculous. A dark blue perfection matching her eyes, adorned with large white polka dot ruffles, flirty bows and sequins. High-heeled sandals completed the outfit. Not only her classmates, but all the other boys from her school invited Cynthia to dance. Everyone wanted to embrace such a delightful princess, but she was taken away from the evening by the lead singer of the musical band that performed at the prom. Stan was enchanted by the young girl. At 25, he couldn't remember ever having such a crush on anyone. She's not just a girl, she's a delicate blue primrose, as divine and rare as the flowers my mother grows in the garden. She seems so fragile. I'm almost afraid to touch her. He thought to himself when he saw her for the first time. Stan kept these thoughts to himself, but gallantly invited Cynthia to have a coffee while the musicians took a break. The girl was flattered. The tall, long-haired, handsome man made her stand out from the crowd of other graduates. She was charmed by the attention of such a mature young man. He looked after her so wonderfully that evening, gazing so devotedly into her shining blue eyes, that any girl would have melted in no time. Cynthia was no exception. Popular love songs stirred her imagination. The admiring glances from a bevy of suitors boosted her self-esteem. After the graduation ball, Cynthia allowed Stan to escort her home and even kissed him. He asked her on a date for the following evening. A family council on the graduate's future took place the morning after the festive evening. Cynthia firmly told her parents that she would enter into marketing and sales. She refused to listen to any arguments her parents made in favor of choosing a more prospective field, and the older generation was forced to retreat before such iron determination. Cynthia's immediate plans for the future somewhat upset her enterprising neighbor Samantha, but the girl promised to work at her shop after her studies. Samantha, in return, firmly promised a daily 5% of the proceeds and a joint trip for the procurement of goods. That's how Cynthia's future career began. She became quite a well-known personality in the regional city, the owner of a supermarket chain called Home and Family. In these stores, one could replenish food stocks and buy clothes, shoes, cosmetics, and household supplies for home repair and cleaning. Cynthia graduated from the Faculty of Economics at her local college. She considered studying law, but realized she no longer wanted to be a student, even part-time. Business consumed all her time. She was one of those entrepreneurs who could not only stay overnight in one of her many offices, but could live in them for a week without noticing that her son was beginning to forget what his mother looked like. Babysitters weren't saving the day. He missed her terribly. At such moments, Cynthia would literally grab Philip and take him off to some warm seaside, where she devoted herself entirely to her only son, whom she loved beyond measure. She loved his smell when she buried her nose in the thick crown of his blonde hair. She loved his voice when she lay beside him in the evening and he demanded, "Mum, I don't want a fairy tale. I'm already big. Read me Financier by Theodore Dreiser, please." Philip grew up into a tall, handsome guy. He excelled in all school subjects but gravitated towards literature and history. The choice of his future profession came naturally. He easily entered the Faculty of Journalism. Cynthia didn't even need to use her connections in university circles. And now, Cynthia declined her chauffeur's help, deciding to drive to the bridal salon herself. She loved driving, but her position obliged her to maintain a certain image and keep a staff in her house. Although she disliked these nods to the so-called elite society snobs, she complied. If she could, she'd ride her old motorbike from her country house to the city and back. Philip's father, the same musician from the ensemble that entertained young people and parents at the graduation party, had taught her to handle the iron horse perfectly. Back then, on their first date, he picked her up on a brand new Ducati shimmering in the sun with bright-colored headlights. Cynthia waited for their meeting with bated breath, thrilled by his dashing wheels. Their romance spun and developed rapidly, but like a bright comet across the sky, it disappeared quickly behind Stan's new love horizons. It turned out that the young man constantly sought young, inexperienced hearts. He liked to be the first man for young women. After playing with another pretty doll baby, or bunny, as he liked to call his admirers, he'd vanish without a trace. He courted beautifully. No one could resist his charm and charisma. He never forced anyone, spared no expense for nice gifts, pampered and showered with compliments. waiting for the girl to want to thank her boyfriend herself. A week after their first date, Cynthia flaunted beautiful gold earrings. Her girlfriends were crazy with envy. Cynthia's parents didn't interfere in her love affairs. They saw their daughter's eyes burning with happiness, but didn't worry. Stan seemed decent. Cynthia didn't stay overnight, and she never returned home late. Warmed by the young man's hot embrace, the girl flew home on wings every time, then lay awake half the night, remembering her gentle friend. The end of their romance resembled a hackneyed, tearful melodrama plot. Autumn rustled outside with yellow and scarlet leaves. Stan began to appear less often. Cynthia had to spend some evenings with her notes instead of going on dates. Then increasing fatigue started to set in. Her appetite disappeared and she felt persistently nauseous in the mornings. It didn't occur to her that she was already 2 months pregnant. At 18, it's rare to have serious experience in such matters. Cynthia's mother was the first to sense something amiss. Her daughter's constant trips to the bathroom immediately suggested the reason for her indisposition. She asked her daughter directly, "Cynthia, did you and Stan have something?" "Look me in the eyes." The girl didn't deny it. She had always been firm in character. "Stan and I love each other. I'm an adult, so if your suspicions have any basis, we'll get married as circumstances dictate. I will give birth to a child, and we will have a real family." But Cynthia had no idea that Stan was already circling his new favorite. At that very moment, he was taking another naive young lady to an ice cream parlor, eagerly anticipating to seduce her. In his dreams, he had already pictured how this joyful event would unfold, completely forgetting about Cynthia. She was a bygone stage in his career as a local Casanova. The conversation between Cynthia and Stan took place a couple of days later. He calmly received the news of her pregnancy. Neither paternal feelings nor even a small fraction of responsibility troubled him. "Babe, you're not a little kid anymore. You should have taken care of that right away. I can't be a dad. You know that. My whole apartment is full of music equipment, and the guys and I rehearse in my studio all the time. A baby won't be comfortable there. To be honest, I wanted to tell you that our love affair is over. It was just an infatuation on my part. So goodbye, and don't hold a grudge." Then he added through clenched teeth, "I'm not a monster. I'll give you plenty of money for the termination. When you're done with this case, find me and I'll pay you back what you spent." Cynthia loved Stan deeply, living and breathing only for him. Now, after his words, her soul withered, her heart encased in ice. Another quality in her character was her pride. She composed herself, maintained her dignity, grit her teeth in silence, and make life-altering decisions alone. At home, she gathered her parents in the small living room and declared, "There will be no wedding. In fact, there will never be a wedding in my life. But I'm keeping the baby. It's not my child's fault. They have a scumbag for a father. I'll make up for everything they won't get from him." The wedding store was across town in a new building. On the way, Cynthia tried to banish her memories, steeling herself so Zoe and the store staff wouldn't see her distress. The store welcomed Mrs. Fish like royalty, ushering her to the rows of luxurious dresses. The director, who was a man in his 50s, fawned over her, exclaiming, "Mrs. Fish, do you really have a grown son? I thought you were no more than 30. Cynthia inwardly cringed. She'd never enjoyed forced niceties. Aloud, she said, "I hope news of my only son's wedding isn't flying around town, on the wings of gossip from your store. You can be sure." The director's voice oozed like honey. "My girls know discretion. We understand the need for privacy." Zoe was sitting in the vast room with its many changing booths, trying to blend into the elegant couch. Memories washed over Cynthia again. She saw herself heavily pregnant, working at Samantha's store. The baby would need so much after birth, and her parents were still jobless. In the distance, outside, she spotted Stan tenderly embracing his new girlfriend. The girl pointed at the colorful swimsuits in Samantha's shop window, and they came in. Stan, unashamed, greeted Cynthia as a mere acquaintance. After buying a swimsuit, the couple left. Cynthia couldn't bear to touch the money. Stan carelessly pulled from his pocket. It felt tainted. Those 5 minutes marked the death of her love for Stan. The faint hope in her heart flickered and died forever. As always, Cynthia didn't cry. Her eyes remained dry, pitying only the foolish girl who left with her new swimsuit. Philip's birth certificate showed a blank for father. For 22 years the boy was hers alone, blood of her blood, flesh of her flesh. They needed no one else. The bridal salon director, hovering near Cynthia, gushed, "Only the best for you and your future daughter-in-law. Choose, try on, select accessories. A wedding day is such a special day for a girl. With the right groom it becomes a cherished memory. I'm sure it will be just so in your case." Cynthia glanced at her future daughter-in-law, who seemed to be trying to disappear into the furniture, and she sighed inwardly. What a wimp. Others would be eagerly browsing dresses, pestering the consultants. This one acts as if it's someone else's wedding. Steeling herself, Mrs. Fish commanded, "Girls, take Zoe's measurements. We'll only look at the latest 2 collections. Nothing outdated. Various shades of white are fine, but remember the bride has brown eyes and blonde hair. Understood?" The salesgirl scurried around, bringing an array of wedding dresses in delicate hues. Zoe trudged to the fitting room with a martyred expression, while Mrs. Fish perched on a high chair. Moments later, the director appeared with a tray of steaming coffee, chilled mineral water, and orange juice. Cynthia mused. How odd. A man with such a subservient attitude. Doesn't he have staff to serve customers? Or am I such a VIP that he's serving me personally? While waiting for Zoe, fragments of her troubled past surfaced in her mind. She thought of the men in her life, mostly young lovers a decade her junior. These guys were flattered by the attention of a beautiful, successful, wealthy, mature woman. She saw them purely for her own benefit, never mixing pleasure with her family vacations. She preferred her suitors well-bred, and in her schedule of the day she marked such dates like this. Meeting at such and such address. Fitness with 2 hours for physical engagement. To her, this was simply a way to preserve her feminine allure, nothing more. However, Cynthia's heart was far from stone. In the 20 years since Philip's birth, she had fallen in love twice. The first was the handsome James, a helper in Samantha's team. He carried bags, maintained the shops. Samantha now had gotten 3 by that time. Cynthia had just graduated from college and enrolled her son in kindergarten. Since his birth, Cynthia's mother had been ever present to help raise her grandson. In fact, until Philip's first day of kindergarten, his grandmother was with him day and night, while Cynthia earned her diploma and worked. At first, Cynthia and James were just friends. They helped each other with everything, especially when Samantha went on her trading voyages. With Cynthia, Samantha were now working under a new contractual arrangement. She leased one of her shops to her. The income of the new business lady increased, and Cynthia now fully supported her parents and son. James was 2 years younger than Cynthia, but looked older. His family also struggled financially, and as the sole breadwinner, he understood and related to his colleagues' aspirations. After visiting 2 shops in the morning and ensuring the other 2 saleswomen were doing well, James would hurry to Cynthia. They had unspoken friendly duties between them. Every day, Cynthia brought a large thermos of hot sweet tea from home. James would run to the bakery for freshly baked goods. They traded vigorously all day until evening, when it was time to clean and close the shop. James helped Cynthia tremendously. She didn't stop at the first shop, but rented and then bought several more outlets, and James was always there for her. Their relationship wasn't searingly passionate. Rather, it was a strong friendship infused with warmth and mutual support. At the beginning of her independent journey, James was in the right place at the right time. They remain friends to this day, though they've long lived in different cities. After 7 years together, James grew tired of Cynthia's refusal to marry or even live together. He left her and Samantha without drama, soon married, and now raises 2 children. Both Cynthia, now successful, and the aging Samantha remember him with gratitude. After James came Pablo, caring, attentive, and affectionate. Cynthia met him in the construction business while building her first supermarket. Fortunately, he didn't try to cheat her on money, quality of materials, or deadlines. Over the past decade, he had helped her erect 3 retail sites, considering all her dreams and wishes. She didn't give in to his advances immediately, despite his handsome, statuesque appearance. Cynthia was troubled by the fact that he was, as she put it, long and deeply married. She couldn't comprehend his arrangement with his wife, where he lived and worked abroad for years. while his devoted Penelope bore and raised their children after his visits. During passionate encounters, Pablo would whisper, "My sweet, just say the word. I'll divorce. I love you so much. I'll move here permanently and build us a house together." Cynthia loved her knight in her own way, but refused to destroy another family. Pablo already had 5 children, and she knew all too well the challenges of raising a child in a single-parent household. She preferred that Pablo's offspring have at least a nominal father, who appeared a couple of times a year bearing gifts, rather than no father at all. In her lover's promises, she latched onto one word: home. She realized she wanted her own dwelling, a nest, a secluded shelter from prying eyes. After launching her 3rd commercial venture, Cynthia became so well known in the city that she couldn't appear in public without drawing attention. Pablo built her a house as a parting gift before her return to her homeland. He was 15 years her senior and had worked tirelessly. Though retirement seemed distant, he never slacked off, pouring his heart and soul into his projects. Consequently, he became overworked and fell ill frequently, complaining about the very heart that beat excitedly while he created stone structures and loved Cynthia. Cynthia never regretted her long affair with him. Afterward came a succession of what she ironically called boys. Now she chose such partners only for physical companionship. Her heart remained silent. Cynthia was jolted from her reverie by the excited chatter of sales consultants surrounding Zoe. Her future daughter-in-law emerged from the fitting room in yet another dress that transformed her nondescript appearance beyond recognition. "This is the one," thought the businesswoman, a true expert and connoisseur who knew how to present herself brilliantly. "In such a dress I won't be ashamed to have her stand next to Philip. They'll make a handsome couple. Oh, I'd give anything to stop this wedding. But Philip is so in love and happy. How can it be the workings of fate to bring together people from such different worlds? Or am I just being possessive?" The chosen dress, fully approved by Cynthia, was carefully placed in a colorful box. Throughout the fitting process, discussing the dress's merits, choosing a veil, and selecting accessories, Zoe remained silent as if she weren't the one about to begin a new life with Philip. Cynthia grew impatient. "Zoe, do you like what the salon stylist picked out for you?" The girl swallowed hard and nodded silently. "Then, with your permission, I'll take the dress with me. It can stay at our house until the wedding. Don't worry, I won't show it to your fiancé, respecting the traditional superstitions. Now, I must go. Would you like to ride to the center, or can you manage on your own?" The store director immediately intervened in the conversation. "Dear Mrs. Fish, you're such a busy woman. We'll send the girl by cab. Everything will be in perfect order. We're delighted that we were able to find a suitable dress for your future daughter-in-law." Within moments, only the lingering scent of expensive perfume remained as evidence of Cynthia's visit to the salon. One of the saleswomen gently guided Zoe to the staff lounge. "I don't envy anyone who becomes the daughter-in-law of that stern woman. She's not human, but a beautiful robot without heart or soul. Oh, I apologize. I'm talking too much. Let's get you some coffee. The car will arrive in 15 minutes. Zoe finally exhaled. In truth, she wasn't as naive as her future mother-in-law believed. She endured all the attacks and scorn directed at her solely because she adored her Philip, who was wonderful and nothing like his prim mother. The girl gratefully accepted a cup of coffee from the saleswoman and smiled radiantly. The saleswoman thought, "This girl isn't as simple as she first appears. With a splash of color to her appearance, she'd be a true beauty. The kind that isn't immediately visible, but once it touches your soul, is never forgotten." At that moment, Zoe's thoughts turned to her mother, Marissa, who had raised her alone without the help of a husband or grandparents. Life in the orphanage was difficult, but Marissa was fortunate that during her time there, she avoided any severe incidents related to her peers' instability. Though the girl's existence was bland and monotonous, lacking vibrancy and parent love, she had unlimited access to the library. The language and literature teacher noticed her talent for writing school essays and contributions to the wall newspaper. On blank pages, little Marissa transformed letters into elegant phrases that captivated readers. The girl had an imagination and wrote with enthusiasm and passion, able to present even small school events as moments of triumph and delight. The catalyst for her becoming a journalism student was an incident involving the city mayoral election. As was customary, the candidate inspected hospitals and orphanages. Such charitable work was beneficial for public relations, demonstrating the candidate's reverence for future generations and concern for patients. After the official's visit, Marissa was tasked with writing an article about him for the school newspaper. Her work impressed not only the children's institution, but also the future mayor's team. The article was published in the local newspaper, discussed by the public, and became a significant asset in the entire election campaign. From the outside, it resembled a Cinderella story. The mayor was successfully elected, not solely due to the efforts of a lonely orphan with literary talent, but her contribution added a touching element of sincerity to the election. The newly elected official didn't forget the girl who had written about him so warmly and sincerely. He actively participated in shaping her life after graduation, ensuring she faced no obstacles when entering college. Zoe's mother became a formidable journalist of regional renown. Her newspaper articles were eagerly anticipated and read with pleasure. She was entrusted with interviewing prominent city figures. One thing turned out tragically. The woman passed her fate of an orphan to her daughter. Marissa left this world early, ignoring the fact that her angina had lingered too long. A swelling of the larynx appeared at the site of the unresolved infection, developing rapidly. By the time the ambulance reached Zoe and her mother's house, through the snowdrifts, the woman had suffocated. After the tragedy, Zoe joined the ranks of orphans. This bitter pill was sweetened by the discovery that her mother had passed on, sought through some unknown genetic channel, bright creative abilities to her daughter. Zoe wasn't interested in participating in PR campaigns. Instead, she was drawn to criminal chronicles and extraordinary phenomena. She would venture out of town to investigate reports of UFOs hovering in the sky above villages, or mysterious corpses discovered by ubiquitous children in the forest. More often than not, these shocking news items turned out to be hoaxes or unverified gossip. However, during one of these outings, Zoe met Philip. They returned to the city together and since then have been almost inseparable, like two peas in a pod. Cynthia, always busy with her business from morning until night, let this fact slip by unnoticed. She was detached from her offspring's student life and everything that typically surrounded it. She knew only that he occasionally went for a couple of days seeking new experiences, wanting to witness some ambiguous events firsthand. But she didn't inquire further, trusting his judgment and independence. She assumed her son had a girlfriend. He wasn't a monk after all, but tried not to pry into his personal life, believing he would share if he wanted to. After the trip to the wedding salon, Cynthia, surprised at herself, didn't go to work. They could manage without her today. It wasn't a kindergarten, but a well-oiled trading machine. She wanted to go home, change into suitable clothes, and relieve stress by racing on her motorcycle. The iron horse seemed to smile at her in a friendly manner. "What's the matter, mistress? Are you feeling down? Let's go chase away the sadness." Only her son knew about Cynthia's passion for motorcycles. Buying an old Harley-Davidson during the years of intensive development of her trading business was initially an impulse, a self-indulgence, a kind of tribute to her grief over the loss of Stan, who had taught her to ride his Ducati in no time. Almost from the first moment she sat on the seat of the powerful machine, she felt at one with it. She could have replaced the antiquated motorbike with something stylish, fashionable, and more modern many times over. But no, she remained faithful to her iron comrade, purchased years ago. She maintained it, nurtured and cherished it, like a favorite child. The woman's lithe figure clung gently to the motorcycle. A mound of hair peeked out from under her helmet, her eyes glistening with pleasure beneath her goggles. She had devised a way to disrupt her son's wedding without being too cruel. "We should incorporate mockery into the holiday script," she thought. The bride will cower, not knowing what to do, and Philip will eventually realize his poor choice of life partner. After zipping through the neighborhood on her motorcycle, Cynthia returned home almost cheerful. She had a glass of wine for courage, then another. She retrieved her manicure kit from her locker, which contained some very sharp scissors. The tiny holes along the bodice and hem of the wedding dress resembled holy embroidery. The store-bought lace lingerie under the dress would show through them beautifully. Let dear Zoe risk showing herself to people in such an obscene state, Cynthia mused. Cynthia slept soundly that night, her confidence growing that she would now win back her son. That same evening, while Cynthia prepared her devious surprise for her future daughter-in-law, Zoe and Philip sat in a cafe. Both had an incurable sweet tooth. "How did it go?" asked the groom, smiling slyly. "Did my mum overwhelm you with her authority?" "No, Philip, she was very kind. You should have seen how the salon director and his staff fawned over her. It was hilarious. She's truly a wonderful woman. She's achieved everything in life by herself. She's raised you to be a joy to me and to her. I hope we'll find common ground and even become friends." 2 days before the wedding, Cynthia couldn't contain herself. She decided to take the dress to Zoe, giving her a chance to fix it. "Perhaps this underdog isn't as simple-minded as I thought," she pondered. "Maybe she'll marry Philip without moral compromise." Cynthia was certain the girl wouldn't be able to salvage the situation with the wedding dress. She wouldn't be able to mend the numerous holes or cover them with some ridiculous applique. She also couldn't afford a new dress. The situation was, in Cynthia's opinion, hopeless. Zoe accepted the box containing the outfit from her future mother-in-law with words of gratitude. She offered her guest tea, but Cynthia cited her busy schedule and hurried away. The girl sensed something amiss in the woman's behavior, and she wasn't mistaken. When she unwrapped the dress, she was quietly aghast. Tiny holes gaped all over the front of the luxurious outfit, turning it into a sieve of expensive fabric. Zoe wept silently. She had neither the strength nor the desire to call and complain to her fiancé. She wouldn't let him down. She'd search her entire closet to find an outfit in which she could appear before the guests the day after tomorrow. After 2 hours of meticulous searching, Zoe realized she had been hasty in her hopes of having suitable clothes. The only dress that fit her had been sewn in the orphanage for the graduation party. The dressmaker at their institution lacked imagination. Nevertheless, Zoe had kept the dress as she embarked on her new life. For student life, jeans, summer pants, t-shirts, and sweaters were more practical, especially considering Zoe's frequent trips to surrounding towns and villages. As a freelance correspondent for the newspaper since her first year, she was always on the hunt for extraordinary stories. The fees she received were just enough to make ends meet. Chic outfits were, of course, out of the question. Zoe felt fortunate that Philip accepted her as she was, pretty, simple. But she never imagined her future mother-in-law would treat her this way. Mrs. Fisher's actions were hurtful to the point of tears. Now Zoe twirled her mother's old broken jewelry box in her hands. The ballerina against the mirrored background, once a childhood delight, refused to move, and no music played. Annoyed, she threw it on the bed, but failed, and the box fell to the floor, cracking in half. A small notebook tumbled out. Zoe snatched up the find and opened it, recognizing her mother's handwriting. She had been reading avidly. It was a diary of sorts. Skimming dates, she focused on names and events, her head spinning. In these notes, her mother confessed to doubts and agonizing, fateful decisions. For the first time, Zoe discovered the answer to the question of her father's identity. The news was overwhelming. It was a famous actor from the local drama theater, Paul Baxley. His face adorned numerous posters around the city. Zoe couldn't comprehend it. What could have connected her mother to this handsome man? The diary held the explanation for this puzzling revelation. A savvy journalist had once been assigned to interview the rising theater star. The young couple took a liking to each other, but their passionate romance was short-lived. Paul soon became caught up in a whirlwind of new admirers, so his mother found herself pregnant after just a few private encounters. Marissa chose not to inform him about the outcome of their meetings. The man was so immersed in the lifestyle that he would hardly have made an attentive father. Making a decision for two people isn't a fair approach to such a momentous event as the birth of a child. Yet strange and unwise as it may seem, women do it sometime. Marissa was no exception. She didn't seek out Paul or have a serious conversation with him. Instead, she kept everything secret, condemning her daughter to grow up fatherless. God be her judge. Zoe felt unqualified to judge her mother's actions. I don't know how Mum and I would have lived if she and my dad had been together. I now vividly recall how she always took me to the theater for premieres and regular performances featuring him. She never made a fuss about it. It turns out we went to be near my father, and my mum, the woman who loved him, judging by the diary, tried to catch even a glimpse of the object of her affection. No psychologist would venture to give Zoe a definite characterization regarding her strength of will and character. At times she was afraid of minor obstacles, burying her head in the sand. Other times she could move mountains to find a needle in a haystack. Now she packed the ballerina box into a bag, remembering to include her mother's diary, and set out to find the drama theater's contact information. She was determined to get to the bottom of this long-ago story. She would meet her father. Paul Baxley sat in his dressing room, struggling with his face, or rather, with the layers painted and glued onto it. Removing what he jokingly called his facade, several layers of professional makeup, was quite a challenge, but he disliked calling on his makeup artist for help. After another performance, he felt like a lemon squeezed dry. As cliched as it might sound, he loved his profession deeply, pouring his strength and soul into it. He never gave a shoddy performance and always strived to stay in shape. Morning jogs in the park, swimming, and even gym sessions were part of his routine. He never overindulged in alcohol or cigarettes. His only weakness was an insatiable appetite for coffee and the occasional cake. He comforted himself with the notion that Sweet Tooth were inherently good people. Wasn't that true of him? In his daily life, Paul was no sybarite, having been born and raised in a family of intellectuals. His father was a professor of chemistry, while his mother was a philologist with a passion for Oriental literature. Both were multilingual and well-traveled. They invested all their love and connections in giving their son the opportunity to graduate from theater school. Their home never aspired to luxury. The priorities were books, music, theater, and art exhibitions. The spacious apartment brimmed with paintings, statuettes, and photographs in intricate frames, while the furniture was antique, preserving an air of aristocratic refinement. The actor was just finishing removing his stubborn makeup when his faithful assistant knocked on his dressing room door. "Paxley, almost everyone has left the theater, but there's a girl at the guard post asking for you. Your fans are getting bolder. This one claims she's your daughter." The artist raised his eyebrows in astonishment. He had been briefly married twice, and both unions had ended in failure to produce an heir to the city's famous family. His ex-wives had sought to bask in his fame and spend his earnings from theatrical productions and film shoots. Their plans hadn't included diapers, baby clothes, or childcare. The divorces had always somewhat upset him. However, where there's no love, there's no sorrow. Paul had visited the registry office twice, solely to please his mother. After futile attempts to marry off her beloved son, the woman finally left Paul in peace. She reconciled with his temporary girlfriends, even welcoming those who had stayed with him longer into her home. Like her husband, she wasn't prudish and turned a blind eye to her son's love affairs, only occasionally lamenting, "My amorous troublemaker, you should have married at 20 to 25, when you were as pliable as wax. Now you've grown old, so spoiled by women that I can't imagine who could attract you. My only regret is that your father and I are no longer young, and we never had grandchildren. Would you want to become a father now, at 50? Paul walked to the guard post, recalling his last conversation with his mother. He suddenly wondered what would his wise mother do if he suddenly had a grown child. She'd probably scold him heartily for missing life's most important experiences, then shower all her pent-up love on her new grandchild. Indeed, a solitary female figure stood near the guard at the theater's entrance. She didn't resemble the typical admirer of a mature artist. Paul Baxley regarded her quizzically. The girl spoke hesitantly. "I found my late mother's diary. It states clearly that you're my biological father. I have just one request. Please read these notes from a woman who has passed away long ago. I'm willing to take a DNA test, but my mother was never a good liar. I believe her." Something in the young woman's impassioned speech intrigued Paul. He asked her only one question. "Why did you choose to meet me at such a late hour?" We could address all questions about my supposed paternity tomorrow with fresh minds. I'm exhausted after tonight's performance. To be perfectly honest, Baxley, I wouldn't have sought you out at all, but I'm all alone in this world. My life is at an impasse. I was to be married the day after tomorrow, but apparently I didn't suit my mother-in-law. Just days ago, she and I bought my wedding dress, and today she returned it with holes she'd apparently made herself. And who's this wicked witch? That's Mrs. Fish, a well-known businesswoman in our area. Paul whistled. He'd seen this lady from afar, impregnable as a stone citadel, yet beautiful, proud, and intelligent. He'd found her attractive, stirring a keen male interest. He performed at the opening of one of her supermarkets, but he flatly refused to get acquainted. The party's hostess had seemed too arrogant to him. He'd even left the banquet abruptly because he loathed the company of arrogant snobs. Well, sweet creature, Baxley smiled, let's go to my dressing room to read your mother's diary. A famous actor, renowned for his long career and ability to maintain an impenetrable expression on stage even when overwhelmed with emotion, was covered in goosebumps after reading a confession from the past. He could never have imagined that a woman who loved him so deeply had lived invisibly near him. He vividly remembered the young, witty journalist. She had pursued him after the premiere, conducting interviews on the fly and at the theater's informal gatherings. His parents were vacationing by the sea at the time. After wine, playful banter, and a relaxed atmosphere, he invited her to finish the evening at his home. She didn't refuse. He realized she was in love with him, ready to join his admirers wholeheartedly. She wrote a stunning article about her idol. Everyone at the theater envied him for the piece, so interesting and filled with love for their profession. Paul continued seeing the talented writer for a while, but soon new fans began vying for his attention and their path diverged. "How old were you when your mum passed away?" he asked. 10, Zoe whispered. "So where did you live after her death?" "In an orphanage," Zoe answered simply. Paul Baxley, the honored artist, a veteran of the drama theater, was now deeply ashamed and hurt that he had known nothing about his own child, left an orphan with a living father and grandparents. Baxley rushed to his cell phone and pressed the icon for his mother's number. "Mum, do you still have those delicious cherry pies? Make some tea. I'm not coming alone. Your granddaughter is coming with me. We'll explain later." On her son's wedding day, Cynthia was on pins and needles from mourning. After Zoe's visit, she kept anticipating some outburst from the girl, but the latter remained a stony silence. The future mother-in-law went to the registry office reluctantly, her heart warning her that something was amiss. When the bride was late to the ceremony, Cynthia gloatingly rubbed her hands, expecting a scandal. At that moment, she only felt sorry for Philip, but she consoled herself. He'll find another love interest. The world doesn't end with Zoe. The invited guests had already begun to whisper when suddenly the crowd erupted. "Look, the bride has arrived in a white limousine. How beautiful she is, and what an exquisite dress. Oh, who's walking beside her? Could it be Paul Baxley himself, the star of our drama theater?" Mrs. Fish and Philip froze at the far end of the carpet. Walking proudly in their direction was Zoe, in a stunning white dress, perfectly complementing her shining eyes. On her arm was an imposing man, unmistakably the local celebrity, actor Paul Baxley. Later, at the restaurant, after the official part of the banquet, the guests still couldn't get over Paul Baxley's presence at the party. Philip happily embraced his Zoe, making it clear he would never let her go. "I've lost," thought the hapless mother-in-law. "Ahead of me lie lonely evenings, creeping old age, and my son's distrust if Zoe shared the story of her wedding dress with him." Suddenly, someone put an arm around her shoulders, making Cynthia flinch. A pretty elderly woman stood beside her. "Mrs. Fish, I've finally found you. It's time we got to know each other better. We're family now. My granddaughter Zoe has told me so many wonderful things about you. She was so upset about ruining her wedding dress and afraid to admit it to you. She kept lamenting that you bought her such a marvelous dress as a gift and she couldn't keep it. Let me introduce you to my husband and son. A granddaughter's wedding is such an exciting event. I'm a bit flustered, as I haven't been to such a crowded gathering in a long time." Mrs. Fish couldn't believe her ears. Zoe didn't say a word to the family about who really ruined her dress. That's unbelievable. The whole family decided to celebrate Philip and Zoe's wedding anniversary at Mrs. Fish's country house. Zoe was expecting a baby and didn't want to go to restaurant or cafe. While the men prepared meat at the barbecue, the women, having already set out light appetizers on the gazebo table, chatted serenely. Paul's mother again pestered the lady of the house. When will you and Paul stop hiding your relationship? You're behaving like children. Cynthia, what's this nonsense about never marrying? You've been living together for 6 months and you still won't give up your secrecy. Can't you see how my son is glowing with happiness? And you look even more beautiful. My husband and I are celebrating our golden wedding anniversary next year. 50 years together is no small feat. Marriage isn't hard labor. It's a long road of compromises, I'll admit, but at the same time, it's an exciting journey together. Cynthia, Zoe chimed in. Let's pick the dress together. My wedding dress changed my fate dramatically, giving me a big family where I'm important, needed, and loved. I have the right to participate in your personal happiness, since you once orchestrated mine. She smiled slyly and put her arm around Cynthia's shoulders. Why should anyone need to know how things really were? Let that remain Zoe and Cynthia's secret.